Let's hear it for Sarah. She leads the chapter that is the core of the heart of the Sierra Club, founded in San Francisco, 1892. By a man, it's safe to say, who was on the spectrum, who thought it insufficient at a time when America was reeling with urban smog in the late 1800s, thought it insufficient to do what so many other hiking groups were doing at the time, simply get people into the outdoors to clear out their lungs. No, for John Muir, the mission was to get people into the most beautiful parts of the outdoors to transform their souls. I grew up in the chapter that Ansel Adams founded when he was still alive. He died when I was 11. Cole Weston was also part of that chapter. Safe to say we had the best slideshows ever. I came here today to focus on the climate crisis, but I tell you, I came here with a hole in my heart. See, I sit on the board of the Monterey Bay Aquarium because I'm still the youngest volunteer docent rust-colored blazer wearer in their history. Julie Packard confided in me that the reason I was the only kid there all those years was she had told her general counsel, "You don't need to have a minimum age, they gotta take a college course. Don't worry, we'll only get adults." I took that course when I was 12. And they put the age requirement in apparently quietly just after, but they grandfathered me in. But I was qualified for that job, if you will, because at 9 I was a docent in the Pacific Grove Natural History Museum. If you go there, there's a whale outside called Sandy the whale. Sandy's precisely 10 years younger than me. I can age myself by the celebrations of each anniversary of Sandy the whale. First time I ever raised money was going door to door for Sandy. And our town, under the surface, was a place of much human trauma. Chinese-American village burned down in the early 1900s. The Battle of Monterey, where the Anglos stole Monterey from Mexico, 1840s. And the largest concentration of Native Americans on the West Coast wiped out by Junipero Serra. And yet, as the sponsor of my baseball team, who was a member of that tribe and owned the local grocery store, would remind me, the ritual our town did every year of welcoming the monarchs back started with his tribe. Of all the iconic species in America, the greatest migration is the migration of the monarchs who start in Mexico and many end up in Canada. Western and Eastern together, tiger striped the country. When I was a kid, the boughs, monarchs are light, butterflies are like a portion of a feather. And yet the boughs of the trees in Washington Park would wait as tens of thousands of them would land on them to finish their migration. Tens of thousands. Last year, it was 18. It was 18 monarch butterflies. As urgent as it is for us to talk about the climate crisis, we must give greater voice to the extinction crisis. If we're honest, the climate crisis is just a fancy way of saying the human extinction crisis. And let us not be so anthropocentric as to pretend like the two things aren't wildly connected. I can't even imagine what it's like to stand in Pacific Grove trying to find the 18th monarch. They were a cloud when I was a kid. And yet, as I get older, I was raised in a very comfortable bohemian tribe in Northern California full of activists who were in exile in some way from their family on the East Coast. My dad was disowned and disinherited from marrying my mom because his family was from New England and they didn't really understand marrying black folks. And my mom's friends had socially isolated her because of the Black Power movement. And Bettina Apteker, Berkeley and SDS, grew up with her daughter. So Marshall Gans was hanging out at Tilly Gort's. It was a cool place to be a kid in the 70s. But as I get older, I recognize the responsibility of having been mentored by so many of Martin Luther King's lieutenants. Reverend Orange, Andy Young, Earl Shinholster, Dr. Lowry, all took me under their wing. And there are things they would repeat about Dr. King you won't find in any books. And one of them is that Dr. King urged his lieutenants to internalize that sitting in a room feeling comfortable in a coalition is insufficient. He said, if you are comfortable in your coalition is too small. If you are comfortable in your coalition is too small. And what's the consequence of the environmental movement becoming a comfortable coalition? I mean, it's nice to walk in and feel like it's a reunion and see a bunch of friends I haven't seen in a long time. But in America, we don't get to pass laws, let alone ensure that they stand, and we just wiped out 50 years of environmental regulation. We don't get to maintain laws, let alone pass them without a supermajority. When Stacey Abrams and I teamed up to pass the most sweeping criminal justice legislation at that point, statewide, state level in any state, not in California, but in Georgia, we did it because we sat down at the table with the Tea Party. The same way that Fred Hampton sent his lieutenants to sit down with the lieutenants of Preacher Man and the Young Patriots. And we focused on what we could agree on, and what we could agree on was that Georgia's prisons were too big. And so, when I was a kid, we were organizing to save the redwoods. The first protest I ever organized wasn't a civil rights protest. It was an anti-clear-cutting protest because Max Am was cutting down old-growth redwoods, and Earth First was in the treetops. And our parents wouldn't let us go join the circus because, the circus might get you in prison. So we did the next best thing, and we organized high school students to the California State Capitol to raise the alarm about the redwoods. That was 1989, and almost 80% of America. It was 1989, and almost 80% of America considered ourselves to be environmentalists. Today, it's less than 40%. And I've been in rooms where leading environmentalists won't enter the room until another one leaves. Like we're not content to be even 40%. Let us get smaller. And you know what the high water mark of American environmentalism as an identity of the American people coincides with? It occurred just a few years before the high water mark of the monarch migration. And you know what the consequence of us being content with being less than 40%, let alone less than 50%, let alone less than a supermajority of the American people, it's cost us? The ability to protect species after species that is disappearing at a faster rate than the dinosaur did. In the times of the dinosaurs, fewer species died every month than are dying right now. And yet I have to argue with people about sitting down with Republicans to figure out what we can agree on. And there is nothing more urgent when the extinction crisis is being driven by habitat loss. When it's being driven by pesticides. You know how we stopped the extinction of the bald eagle? We got rid of DDT, and I'm here to tell you it took a lot of people in both parties. Now, when you choose to be the Lorax, when you choose to step into the shoes of John Muir, you've got to have the humility to be willing to just call somebody a friend in that moment if they will simply agree with you on that one thing. There's nothing more urgent in a democracy than to find the one thing we can agree on and go get it done. Now here's the deal, y'all. Why? It's not just like things we did wrong. We are living in a country that is at war with itself. How did this country become at war with itself? Well, I can tell you the first time I spoke at Berkeley on environmental issues, I was a spokesperson for the Student Environmental Action Coalition. I was traveling with the head of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. We were organizing students and union members against NAFTA. We said 3 things would happen if NAFTA passed. American manufacturing would go down the toilet. The Mexican ejido system of village-based corn cultivation would disappear and be replaced with drug crops. And the factories would move to countries that, even if they had environmental regulation, wouldn't enforce them, and it would accelerate the poisoning of Mother Earth. An editorial, we crisscrossed the country, and editorial board after editorial board called us Chicken Little. And since NAFTA passed, because of that and a whole alphabet soup of permanent normal trade relations with China and GATT and WTO and on, 65, and automation, 65,000 American factories have shut down. 65,000 American factories have shut down. You can go to Maine, where my dad's from, the textile industry is gone. You can go to Baltimore, where my mom's from, the steel industry is gone. And with it, the ability of working people who did not go to college to be able to lay a financial foundation for their family and grow it. And you can look at the history of Europe in the early 20th century and many other places on this globe. When you lock the working people of a country into downward economic mobility for more than a generation, 30 years now, they turn on themselves. They scapegoat each other. They attack the immigrants. They attack each other. In other words, brothers and sisters, the hard part is that we're really not going to see that uncomfortably large coalition in this country truly form until we can figure out again how to build an economy that lifts all boats. And if there is good news in this tough moments, it's this: the last time that the Democrats found themselves in exile, they had to talk to each other. They had to humble themselves. And suddenly, AOC's wild idea, Van Jones's wild idea, was on its way to being Joe Biden's signature legislative accomplishment. And because we passed the IRA and we passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill, America over the last 5 years has done something I have never seen in my adult lifetime, because I turned 21 the year that NAFTA went into effect. We have been opening big new factory after big new factory to pursue new industrial opportunities. And there's no greater economic opportunity on planet Earth than planet Earth itself. The need to change the way that everything is powered, the need to change the way that everything is transported. And you know, the kids get it. I was down in Dalton, Georgia, district of Marjorie Taylor Greene. If there was an award for being the most divisive member of Congress, she'd probably get it. But you know, don't shame Dalton too much. It's a lot like America. Just send a terribly irrational, divisive person back to Washington. And I'm touring the Q-Cells factory, what is just on the cusp of being the largest solar panel production facility in the Western Hemisphere. And the only one outside of China, and one tiny, like almost experimental one in Northern Europe, to produce ingot and therefore every component of the solar panel. And you know, you can tell a lot by people from their trucks. My dad's like a kind of a country club redneck from Maine, and wherever you go, rednecks got deer hunting stickers in the back of their trucks. And I watched one pull into a parking spot in the Q-Cells parking lot right next to a brother with 2 Mexican flags in case you missed the first one. And they got out and they greeted each other. Like co-workers working on a factory floor with 1,200 people in one factory, 1,300 in the other, and a bunch of robots, and everybody gets along just fine. It's easier to have grace when everybody's boat is rising. And walking out of that factory, perhaps the easiest thing to miss were the watercolor paintings and the crayons and the Crayola paintings on the wall. I said, what is this? And Kim, who's the managing director of the factory, 5th generation Dalton, Georgia factory worker, remembers well during COVID when unemployment locally was 47%, and that is why everybody sees this factory as a blessing. Because they don't just have carpets anymore to make in Dalton. She says, oh, those are the pictures from last year's Earth Day art competition. I said, what's the challenge? Oh, same one every year. Depict your parents going to work at the solar panel factory. And you looked at those paintings, and the children depicted their parents as heroes saving the planet. Mom with her straight black hair, arm in arm with planet Earth. Dad with his blonde hair and his cape holding up planet Earth. The children come from the voters, who a majority of whom just sent Marjorie Taylor Greene back to office. And yet you could not imagine the children of NASA scientists being any more proud of their parents during our moonshot than the children of Dalton, Georgia are of their parents during our Earthshot. In other words, brothers and sisters, right now we need to do 3 things. Let us give voice to the extinction crisis. Let us root ourselves not in the world of social media and 24-hour news when you just don't even want to talk to your neighbor, but in the world in which our feet are planted, where it's easy to slap them on the back because you see them every day and you know things about them that you love. And let us not just fight like hell to defend what we built over the last 5 years and keep that trajectory going. It is, of course, not just America's best shot for leading this green economy globally. It is our best shot at a real comeback. But most importantly, let us use these years to build greater confidence so that, crazy ideas from people like AOC can be moved into the mainstream, just like we did with the IRA, and prepare to leap forward when the pendulum swings again a little less than 4 years from now. God bless.